and welcome back to another episode of Not Your Mama's Midlife, where we believe that midlife is not a crisis, it's actually an awakening. Hi, I'm Tasha Davis, nurse practitioner and owner of Downtown Hydration and Wellness in Aiken, South Carolina. And if you've been following me on other social media, soon to be North Augusta, South Carolina. So we are going to hop right in. Thank you guys so much for your feedback over the past couple of weeks. It's been pretty heavy with some of the topics that we've been discussing, but necessary, right? And so we are going to kind of continue that this week and talk about some things that you may or may not be experiencing yourself during midlife as it relates to your childhood dysfunction and or childhood trauma. So this past weekend, I was out of town visiting my oldest son for his birthday, 21, y'all. Whew. Anyway, and it was freezing cold like it was in most of the Southeast. And so we were looking for warm things to do. And so we went to go to the movies. My son picked the movie, being the birthday boy. And, of course, I'm just happy to see him. And so I'm like, oh, yeah, let's go. Buy the tickets. Let's do it. Well, I probably should have asked more questions about what we were going to be seeing. The movie kind of taught me that, that saying, a mother's love knows no bounds. Well, that may not necessarily be true, y'all, because, that movie was rough. It was very, very suspenseful. Like the whole thing was just, I did last about an hour, and I felt like it was the same 7 minutes for that entire hour. And I couldn't really tell you anything about the movie in that hour, what it was about, what the goal was. But what I can tell you, it was just very, just that angst. The whole first hour was just angst. Like you didn't know what was happening. You didn't know what was going to happen. It was just this like very uneasy and unsettling feeling for an entire hour, to which at that point, I'm like tapping out, guys. Like I will see you on the other side of whatever this is because I can't do it anymore. And so, on superficially, I'm like, oh, this is a dumb movie. I can't, I'm not interested. So let me go sit back, go somewhere else and, sit on my phone, doom scroll, whatever I got to do. I just can't sit in that room anymore. But as I was sitting out there, I was kind of processing, like, why can't I sit there? Like, why can I can't do it. I can't disassociate enough to where I just do it for the heck of it. Because, we do so many things, especially for our children, that we don't necessarily like doing. What was it about that situation that I just could not physically do it anymore? And I think after processing that, it was, I kind of looked inward and I'm like, because it was very triggering for me, that unsettledness, that not knowing what was coming next, the feeling of, maybe danger, just that, that feeling of, is there going to be a jump scare? Is something lurking? I couldn't tell you if there was anything lurking. I don't know. Didn't even ask for an update, but but I can't. My body just couldn't do it anymore, and so it got me thinking. Like, why is that? Why couldn't I just sit there? That's all I had to do. And I think it really does go back to that trauma and dysfunction from our past, whether it's from childhood or previous adulthood, whatever the case may be. But once you kind of are in that space of, what that feels like, especially if you have lived it outside of an isolated event, like we're living it day in, day out, like our nervous system is in overdrive, right? So we're just like, we're prepared. I don't know what we're preparing for, but we're prepared. And so for me, I know once this, again, I got to make it make sense. And that makes sense for me because my history in some adulthood situations as well as childhood, there has been a lot of dysfunction and trauma. And so with that, my nervous system was just in just this overdrive feeling. And so, it's kind of one of those things where, uh, I'm gonna put the positive on it. The positive to that is I kind of came through a lot of that, and so I understand what it means to sit in peacefulness. And so now that I'm in midlife and I have experienced that peacefulness, now I'm like, whoop, I'm triggered. Whereas before, I didn't know I was triggered because I lived in a constant state of being triggered. So that was life. That was, every single day, every single night, that was what I knew. And then when you don't know what you don't know, we say that all the time. And it's true, I didn't know. So when I get to a place in my life where I am and, experience more peacefulness regularly, and then something like that, I'm in that sort of situation, I really can recognize it more and say, oh, that's what that is. That's a trigger. And, it's very interesting being kind of on that path for myself and being in this place. It has, I've reflected more. And so I've kind of dug a little deeper on some other things that I may not realize are triggers for me, or that my responses are triggered, and why I do or say or react in ways that could be related to childhood trauma, adulthood trauma, and dysfunction. And so, for that moment of that scary angst feeling, in full disclosure, I've never really been a fan of scary movies, but I've never had to literally walk out of one and there wasn't anything scary. There was just the unknown. But if you've ever gone through a traumatic event or significant dysfunction, you know that the unknown is the scariest thing of all, right? We're not scared of the monster staring us in the face because we can tackle that. We got that all day long. We know how to slay the dragon. But it's the unknown that gives us that feeling of just angst and just unsettledness. And that is so hard for a lot of us to just kind of work through. Another way that it could show up for some of us, and I am guilty of this too, so I'm like talking to myself here. um, if you are someone who, just say you're at home, right? You're at home and you don't really have a lot to do, or maybe you do have a lot to do and you're just tired, right? This is midlife, by the way. We get tired. Okay. So we got the hormones hormoning or not hormoning, and that's making us tired. The sleep, the going a million different ways, juggling all the things, wearing all the hats. So we're tired. And we want to maybe just lay on the couch for a minute. Maybe we want to just binge watch TV, maybe doom scroll on our phone, but it's the middle of the day and we just want to take our own little like timeout because we're home by ourselves. Okay. So imagine you're home by yourself. You decide, you know what? I'm just going to lay on the couch. It's not that I feel bad. I'm just tired. I'm just going to take a minute. And then your partner or your kid or someone who lives in the house comes home. Do you automatically have this overwhelming sense to get up and pretend that you were doing something like cleaning? Like you start, immediately you go over to that, laundry basket that has been sitting there for so long and you should have already been folded and put away, but you were so worried that you were going to be caught, right? Not doing anything, just resting. So you were triggered by being perceived to just, being lazy or not doing, because that childhood or adulthood dysfunction and trauma, we have to be doing, right? We have to constantly be busy. It's just busy, 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 busy. We can't relax. And if we do relax, it's very uncomfortable. And we definitely don't want anyone to know that we are relaxing, right? Please tell me I am not alone with that. Or at least just make me feel good. So that is another way that, that childhood trauma and dysfunction can show up, is the need to be busy and then to make sure that no one sees us rest. Okay. Because rest is just like, it's foreign. Or maybe you just constantly need noise, right? Maybe you're someone that it can't be quiet, because quiet is eerie, quiet is uncomfortable, and we need constant noise. Um, I think I have that to some degree. Now I do sleep with a bedside fan, and I love the white noise. So that could or could not be, I don't know. I haven't gone that far deep into my own, peeling back the layers on that one, but I just love the sound of white noise when I'm sleeping. But if you are someone who, like, even when you're not trying to sleep, is you just always have to have something on in the background, right? So keeping yourself aware, like there's something going on, to keep your brain and your nervous system like on alert. And that's what you're used to, because that's what you had to get used to, right? Like that was what you were raised in. That is what feels familiar. And unfortunately, that is what feels comfortable. Well, I'm here to tell you, we're going to get out of that. Okay. We're going to get out of it. We are going to transition our minds into, especially in midlife, when everything is just like staring us in the face, the unmasking, the awakening, whatever you want to frame it as. That is what we are doing in midlife. Okay. We're taking care of us. We are understanding that calm doesn't equal unsafe. Okay. Calm is good. Calm is restorative, right? Calm is just, one of the many, things that the feedback that I get back from patients when they come visit me here, is so calm. It's so calm, and peaceful. And funny story, when I was looking to hire my medical assistant, I had someone come and did kind of like a job shadow / interview. And so I had noticed that she was yawning a lot during the couple of hours that she was here. And, in my mind, I'm like, oh, poor thing. Like, she probably worked at the hospital all night, maybe, or she's had a rough week, or, whatever the case may be. I didn't say anything. And so when she went to leave, and I said, well, I've enjoyed having you. It's been great. Do you have any questions for me? She's like, well, I have one. And I said, okay. And she said, how do you stay awake? Like, between the way it smells and the sounds and the music and the water and the fountain, like, how do you stay awake? She's like, I have been fighting for my life the past couple of hours. And she's like, and I'm not even tired. And so, and I do have patients that, when they're here, they do, take a little cat nap, which I love. And the irony of it is that, this space was created in one of the most traumatic times of my life. My world collapsed and blew up, and it was very difficult, and it was the most challenging time of my entire life. And I think that for me, I created a space that I needed. I created a space of peace, of stillness, because I didn't have that, and my body was telling me this is what you need. So I didn't have it at home. Everything at home was triggering for me. And so I created a space that my body needed. And I didn't even realize it, right? I didn't even realize it. It was kind of like autopilot, and I never thought about it. And it was just like, I have a vision, I'm doing, what do I need today? Oh, I think a fountain. And so it worked out beautifully. But I do always secretly just kind of giddy to myself when someone makes that comment, just because, I'm like, oh, thank you. If you only knew how this was done, because I paid a price for it. And, it has been, again, we're turning it to the positive. So that is the positive of things, and listening to your body. And so I listened, whether I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but that's what happened. And I'm so glad that it did. And I'm so, 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 so thankful that so many of you have enjoyed it, right? And you feel it. I always say it's the vibe, right? The vibes are got to be vibing. And so that's the vibe for my space here. So something else that could kind of pop up as far as like being a trigger of that childhood trauma or dysfunction is sounds or voice tones, right? So if you were someone who, in your childhood, there was, you knew you were in trouble, by a tone that someone had for you when they were speaking to you, or if they made a noise, or if they, there was a phrase, or, there was something. And when you hear that now as an adult, even not from from the trigger, it could be just in casual conversation. Someone could make a comment and it's like you catch your breath, right? And you have that doom feeling, and it just sits in the like pit of your stomach. So that's a trigger, right? So I want you to recognize that, because that could be part of what your midlife awakening is showing you as to an unhealed area, right? And we all know we respond not so great when we are responding unhealed. And so the point of the exercise is for us to recognize it, accept it, kind of, do the work and heal and move forward, and just, help other people, pay it forward. So for me, it's not, I don't really have that many like sounds or, things like that. But, there have been a couple of sayings that someone would say, and, it's like, whoa, like, whew, that one got me, and so it's like, mental note, need to work on that, Tasha, need to work on that a little bit more. So I will say probably one of the biggest things that I struggled with that shows kind of like my triggered side is hyper independence. Now, we all love an independent woman. So don't get it twisted when I'm trying to explain this, but hyper independence, like the absolute refusal for someone to help you, or, anything like that. That hyper independence for some people, and it was for me personally, it was protection. It was, I associated it with control. So I had been, my childhood, I had no control, right? Most kids don't, right? Your parents pick where you live, your parents pick where you go to school, they buy your clothes, they cook your meals. So there's not a lot of control there, right? For most any kids. But there, when you have a childhood that has trauma attached to it and dysfunction attached to it, that level of control that is needed when you get to adulthood is just so much more. And so what we tend to do is, we just swing the opposite way, right? Especially if you are an ADHDer like me, we're like feast or famine. It's all or nothing. So finding that balance is very, very difficult and challenging for us, but so important too. But when you need that control, because that gives you a false sense of safety, because we are in control. We can say the if, ands, buts, whatevers, how fars, whatever the case may be. Like, we are just hyper independent. We don't need anybody because we have been raised in an environment where we couldn't depend on anyone but ourselves. So then we get to adulthood and midlife, especially, and we struggle because we're at a point where we have gone through this hyper independence phase. Now, this could be personally within your family dynamics, with your partner. This could be with your career. This could be, within your friend group. Just this hyper independent state of mind. And so for me, it showed up a lot in my marriage. And it was this, I'm gonna, pay the bills, and I'm gonna organize the house, and I'm gonna be in charge of everything, and I'm gonna, because that's what made me feel safe. I felt safe because I knew I was in the driver's seat of everything. However, that way of thinking almost cost me my marriage, because for me, what happens is I'm hyper independent, right? I'm hyper independent. I'm like, I'm doing it, right? Not going to tell me no. I make my own money. I buy what I want. I do what I want, blah, 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 all this, that, and the other. Everything's good. I'm in control. I feel safe. But then there comes a point where and I mentioned this before when we were talking about midlife and our marriage, what can happen in our relationships in midlife. And it got to a point where I was internally struggling with balancing hyper independence and then also just wanting to feel taken care of. Right. So I was kind of, what do they call it? The soft, my feminine era, my soft era. So my body was telling me I needed to be a little softer, right? I needed some rest. And in order for me to rest, I had to have someone to help me. And so that was really hard to just kind of like balance that. And I did not do it gracefully, let me just say. I know that is very shocking for you, but I was not graceful about that. But I didn't know that that's what was happening in the moment, because again, I was responding from a very unhealed place. So my responses were wounded responses. And so now looking back, I can, woof, girl, that was unhealed. That did not serve you well at all. So it's easier. Again, hindsight is always 2020. But it is a lesson that I learned, to just rest, relax, and depend on someone. And it's almost even more freeing to be able to have someone to help. Whether it be a partner or a friend, or, whatever the case may be, someone, maybe it's in your workplace, and you're like, some of us are not good like managers because we want to do all of it, right? But then when you learn that, hey, other people have strengths too, and if you kind of give them permission to show up how they can help you, like, together is better, right? So whether it's personal, whether it's, career wise, professionally, you can be better together, but you have to kind of recognize that you're doing the thing, right? You got to recognize it, and you kind of got to peel back some layers and do some work on yourself, to, figure out a path forward, because everybody's path is different. But that hyper independence, that's how I survived. That was my survival mode. So I'm not knocking the hyper independence. I'm just recognizing that now that I'm in midlife, it doesn't have to be that way. Like it was a survival mode. And I'm glad that I had that in me. I'm really glad that I did, because there were some situations that maybe some people, would have come through, not seeing the positive. But at any rate, I have learned that, I'm actually not in control. Shocker. So all of that trying to like hyper independence and just like vigilant, like trying to be in control of everything. Who knew that it would actually be more satisfying to just kind of let that control go just a little bit? It's a work in progress for me. I'm still trying. I'm doing better though. I think my husband would agree. I'm doing a lot better. And so I think sometimes now, again, finding balance as an ADHDer. So sometimes I'm like, I can't do this. Babe, can you help me do this? Babe, can you help me do this? So now I have no problems letting my husband take care of me. And it feels good. It feels good. I like it. Uh, I can still boss up though. I just, I pick and choose those things because, I'm a little wiser, a little older, a little wiser. And just, I have learned that, you can be better together. And so I love that. Some other ways it can show up is sleep. We had a whole podcast episode a couple of weeks ago about sleep and the different ways that our sleep is just disrupted during midlife. It could be hormonal. It could be, relationship struggles. It could be, internal stressors, external stressors. So our sleep is just disrupted. It takes a heavy hit during midlife. And sometimes it still could be that childhood dysfunction and trauma kind of sneaking its way back in. It could be, and I am very guilty of this as well. I told you this was pretty much going to be a diary for me today. But watching the same shows over and over and over. So I watch Grey's Anatomy. I have probably watched the entire episode. Nothing new. I probably haven't seen a new episode in years. So just the Netflix, whatever's on Netflix. Okay. So that's what I fall asleep to almost every single night. And there is some psychology to that of like, we people who are trauma survivors, we need consistency. We don't like change. We don't like to be surprised, like the movie. We like the known. We like to know what's coming next because that brings us comfort, because our nervous system has just been in such a fight or flight for so long. Our bodies are craving monotony. They're craving, we know what comes next. And so you may be one who's like me, that you just take comfort. It never gets old, right? You watch it. You're not even really like watching it, right? Sometimes like for me, I'm like, I have it playing, but then I'm still like on my phone or, reading or whatever, but I have it playing in the background because it brings me comfort, because I already know what's going to come next. And so that is comforting to me. So that is how I'm able to kind of transition into falling asleep. And so, there's a lot of different ways, so many more ways that childhood trauma and dysfunction can kind of show up, and even adult trauma and dysfunction show up in our midlife. But the main thing is that I really want you guys to understand that, during midlife, it can feel so chaotic, right? The hormones, and then, maybe you're empty nesting. Maybe you are, having some financial stressors, or maybe you found yourself newly divorced and single and trying to navigate dating in midlife, all of these uncertain situations that maybe you've never been in before. So we got a lot going on. We got so much going on. However, you're not weak, right? You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not being dramatic, right? Midlife this is a very tender time in our lives. It's very tender. It's revealing so much. and we're learning ourselves again. We're learning, maybe we're learning who we wished our 15-year-old self was. Maybe we're, becoming who we wish we could have been in our 20s and our 30s. I am very much of the belief that experience is the best teacher. And so when you kind of go through those things, it shapes you and it molds you. I hope that it's for the better. And that would be putting the positive on it. So but I just really want you to know that despite this being a very tender time in our lives, it's for a reason and it's for a purpose. And these things, the childhood trauma, childhood dysfunction, we weren't raised with that as a topic of conversation. We weren't raised with conversations of, our parents talking about healing from their childhood. I mean, maybe you have that situation. I wasn't privy to that with my family or with any of my other friends' families. That wasn't a topic of conversation. But now when you know better, you do better. So now that we know better, we're doing better, and we are talking about those things now because it's so important. Um, because when we say it, we give permission to others to say their truth too. And that's what this is. We're saying the thing. And so I just want you guys to know, if you are kind of feeling that, what the heck is going on? My hormones are balanced, or, all this going on, but I still feel this something, this undercurrent, this low hum of something unhealed. Just sit quiet with yourself. You know, maybe you don't know that that's what's happening. I challenge you to sit quiet with yourself. Just listen. Our bodies are always talking to us. We just have to sit still, be quiet, and listen. So that is all we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. If you have any questions, concerns, or topics you'd like me to discuss, you know where to find me. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I look forward to many more podcasts to come. I'm thinking next week I have a little fun idea topic that's kind of been rolling around in this head of mine that I think you guys would like. So don't forget to tune in next week. I hope you guys, again, see you guys next week. Have a great rest of your week, and take care. Bye.